Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to RIGEN. I am Valerie Nye, the library director here at Santa Fe Community College, and I'm glad you've made it to tonight's online gathering of our Fall 2025 series. As many of you know, RIGEN is a collaboration between the SFCC Library and the Creative Writing Department. Each writer joins us for 2 weeks, first for a reading and then for a creative session with writing prompts. And as I've said before, we'll close the semester in November with a community reading. So we hope you all will be writing and will come back in November to share your work. I want to take just a moment to thank SFCC's Marketing and Public Relations Department, especially Emily Drabansky and Roxanne Tapia for always working hard to get the word out and for helping us to get recordings of these events online and accessible. As always, I'm also grateful to be hosting tonight with my colleague Austin Eichelberger, who brings a creative energy and dedication to this really exciting event. Austin is a faculty member at SFCC's Creative Writing Department. He's also an artist, a writer, and he brings a wealth of creative insight to teaching and to this project. I've been so grateful for that. As we get started this evening, I want to encourage you all to put questions for our reader in the chat. We'll be gathering those together and asking questions at the end. So with that, I will turn things over to Austin. Are you there, Austin?
Okay, now I am. I'm so sorry. I
Okay.
don't know what just happened. And I might go out again because my VPN is being funny. Sorry, I just want to make sure I don't cut out again. Okay. Perfect timing, right? Always.
Inevitably.
Yeah, let me go ahead and read this intro. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. This creative session is, this reading is brought to you by the Santa Fe Community College Library and Creative Writing Program. We are thrilled to have you join us tonight for this special reading event. We hope you'll come back to celebrate the power of words and storytelling at our future events. Tonight's gathering is an invitation to those who have interest in the written word. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a writer, whether you'd like to craft compelling fiction, pen evocative poetry, or explore the world of nonfiction, SFCC is awaiting your arrival. In our program, students can earn a certificate or an associate's degree in English language creative writing. The Santa Fe Community College Creative Writing Program nurtures aspiring writers, providing them with the tools, guidance, and inspiration to take their creative endeavors to new heights. We believe that writing is not only a useful and practical skill, but an art form that has the potential to transform lives and connect people across time and space. SFCC's creative writing program is focused on your development as a writer, a reader, and a member of a creative community. Our faculty are published authors and professional editors, and our course offerings include a multi-genre workshop and an internship with the Santa Fe Literary Review, SFCC's in-print literary journal. Related degree and certificate requirements include opportunities to intern with local magazines, at local newspapers, and in local publishing houses, to explore the world of book arts, and to hone screenwriting skills. Students work closely with professors and peers to develop, revise, and publish creative and academic writing in a range of genres and formats. Upon completion, you'll gain the skills and experience to submit a manuscript for publication, pursue a career in editing, or continue your studies in creative writing. You can also now complete the entire program online. Please see the chat for links to our program website, where you can see our course offerings for spring 2026, explore the program requirements, and find information about the Santa Fe Literary Review and the Kate Besser Awards, which are SFCC's very own writing awards. For those of you considering your own creative writing journey, we encourage you to ask questions, any questions you have about the program. Whether you're an experienced writer looking to take a single course or a complete novice ready to explore your creative potential, we have classes and resources for you. In Santa Fe Community College's creative writing program, we believe that everyone has a story and every story is worth sharing. Tell us yours. Okay, and now I get to introduce one of my favorite people in the world, Rowena Alegría. Rowena has served as chief storyteller for the City and County of Denver and is the founder of the Denver Office of Storytelling. She has spoken internationally about the power of storytelling and was the 2024 Cobb Peace Lecturer at Naropa University. She received her MFA in fiction from the Institute of American Indian Arts in 2018. Her creative writing has appeared in The Rumpus, Mississippi Review, Henny Pen Review, and the anthology We Are the West. She is currently at work on her novel 500 Springs. Please join me in welcoming Rowena.
Thank you, Austin. Yay. I'm so happy to be here. Austin and I, and there's at least a couple other folks on here who graduated from IAIA in 2018. So it's wonderful to maintain that. And I love when you talk about writing being a bridge across time and space, because I feel that way entirely, and it goes right into my novel 500 Springs. So thank you, Austin. I will be reading from my novel in progress tonight, with an emphasis on some of the challenges I'm facing in working to get it finished. It has been a journey. The first iteration of this, I thought I was going to write a trilogy, and I wrote probably 120 pages of book one way back in 2009. And then I took a break for a big job. I came back in 2016, and for some insane reason thought it would be easier to combine 3 books into one book. Yeah, I can laugh about it now. All these years later, I'm still figuring that out, and I have written 150,000 words. That giant binder over there on the far, I guess you're far, I'm so directionally challenged, the one over there. That is what I've written so far. It's 700. It's crazy talk, and no ending. How wonderful is that, right? But this version in reality began at IAIA in 2017-ish. And in 2018, we graduated, and I had a 150-page thesis and thought, this is going to be cake now. I'll get this done. I'll get it published. I'll, have a bestseller or whatever. And here I am, 2025, and I'm still writing. So maybe don't make your first novel so complicated. 2 narrators living multiple lives over 500 years is just a little bit hard to write. So anyway, I'm going to read you the synopsis. That's all right. 2 young lovers were torn apart when the Spanish destroyed the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in 1521. In the 500 springs since, they've searched many lives to be together, proving their spirit and devotion even when fate has been unkind. As orphans meant to populate Nueva California, and as parents caught in the crossfire of independence, they found each other in tragedy again. As a novitiate in a convent in New Spain, caught up with the famed but incendiary poet Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, and as a boy stolen away to mine silver, they journeyed alone to a similar end. Finding each other anew online at the turn of the 21st century feels destined. A social worker from Texas and a community engagement specialist for the Denver schools, they suspect they've loved before, but as they face today's challenges, including adoption, homelessness, addiction, and access to healthcare and opportunity, history reveals itself in past lives and in their own tangled family lore, from Plymouth Rock to Pancho Villa. The weight of the past threatens to break the lovers apart again, perhaps for the very last time, unless they can unearth their genuine legacy and divine their place in it. So, yeah, exactly. I think it's a decent and appealing synopsis at this point. It was a bear to write. This is probably version 15, something like that. And it's gotten much better as my understanding of the novel has improved. So anyway, I do want to talk about some of the other challenges I faced in drafting the novel, but I'm going to share some of the work first, and then we'll get to that. All right. So I'm good to go. I'm going to start reading. All right. So here's the latest opening for you. The title is XX/1999. As 1911 came to a close, the Mexican Revolution was a year old. Senor Francisco y Madero had been elected president, and my first grandfather left the home of his parents without saying goodbye. At 12, he was slight, but nearly as grown as he would ever be, and in search of something beyond rising with roosters, tending fields, rereading poems he had ages before memorized, and drafting his own small verses in a small notebook he carried everywhere with a skinny pencil tied to a string. He admitted to being young and foolhardy, aware of the growing unrest in his country, but as far removed from it as from the fall of Moctezuma centuries before. He was then at least as far from me, nearly a century hence, and for decades equally oblivious to him, and how his appearance in my life would eventually lead me and my dualidad all the way back to empire. The young Dariel moved, as we all do, around the bend and not toward destiny. He wished to escape boredom and to answer his curiosity about all the stories he'd been told by his tio and others who had traveled on trains and visited floating gardens, who would not want to confirm with his own eyes a palace boasting of iron dragons and marble floors, and devoted to delivering letters and parcels across the mountains, deserts, oceans, and jungles of the entire country. Dariel desired to bear witness to Porfirio Diaz's efforts to turn Mexico's capital city into the Paris of the New World before los Maderistas embarked on yet another plan to remake a country with such a long history the beginning had ages ago gone missing. After 5 long days of walking, eased by the occasional ride on a wagon, the boy who was to become my first mother's father, whose given name was Dariel Lorenzana, arrived to Mexico City knowing no one. The few coins in his mochila depleted already. The city felt huge because it was, but also due to this being his first time getting around on his own in such a place, with no idea where he was headed. And yet he thrilled at seeing whatever he happened upon, a colossal steel bird's nest poking into the sky that would one day be another famous palace, this one dedicated to the arts, a massive and many-chambered cathedral, altered and statued in gold, sprawling markets selling items he could not name, people speaking in languages both familiar and foreign, looking and smelling that way too. An entire troop of uniformed boy soldiers, no older than he, moving in formation across the Zocalo. Dariel sought work, but in what, since he had never been paid for his efforts, he had no idea. Everyone seemed too busy to bother with a quiet inquiry from a provinciano, so he kept moving. The bustle of people largely ignored him anyway. Sometimes he ate. From the side of the avenida where horses and burros pulled carts and buggies, he snickered at the men's fancy suits and shiny shoes, at their hats with brims too slim to shade anything but the tips of ears from a harsh sun. Such silly attire for a pale-skinned working man, sillier still for women who passed their vain and pointless days trussed up and sipping foreign beverages in fragile containers. From afar he could not recognize what delicacies they were served by meseros in white gloves, but he inhaled as if he might fill himself on aromas alone. At the end of their feast, the fancies poured into the street, looking proper and full as strawberries. For many, without so much as a wave, their volantes arrived to collect them. The first stiff driver in stiff suit had a nose as big and brown as Dariel's cousin Jose Maria, whom they all called Narizon in acknowledgment of his most prominent feature. But according to grandfather, Narizon would have balked at the tone of the woman he helped aboard her carriage, made a performance of assisting, bowing deep, perhaps all the way to the earth in the old way, earning himself a majestic nod or a scarlet reprimand, depending on the senora's digestion, as well as the lauding of his fellows once word got around. This stiff driver moved as if he was immune to the insult, or a deaf mute. The younger of the strawberries walked to the nearest corner, handed over coins, and took seats on the streetcars that rattled their side of the avenue. Dariel wished to ride too, for the experience, just to say he had, and be able to describe it. But he had no pesos to his name and nowhere to go. He leaned against a wall and observed a muchacho around his age, selling periodicos on the street corner by crying out the headlines, 130 dead in Chiapas, plot to kill Madero foiled, Zapatistas burn villages and conscript inhabitants, Diaz gets a well-deserved rest in Europe, but hopes to return. That one made Dario laugh out loud. The voceador noticed and called Dario over. Oh, yeah, he said, can you read? From his folding chair behind the head table, the birthday boy chuckled at the memory. Could he read? The few of Dario's grown offspring and grands gathered round, men mostly, laughed with him, as did I, a little too vigorously, but absolutely delighted by the big gummy grin that offered me a glimpse of the boy who grew up fighting alongside the infamous Pancho Villa, a boy so unlike the old man I had been grateful but surprised to meet in his 99th year. On this day, commemorated for another reason no one mentioned in polite but devastating deference to me, my first grandfather became a centenarian. In the lush backyard-like patio of a restaurant in a tiny Texas town not 10 minutes from the Mexican border, about 100 friends and mostly relatives celebrated. A line of tables were loaded with grilled meats, beans and rice, tamales and enchiladas in warming trays, corn tortillas wrapped in towels, sweating glass barrels of fruited water, bowls of their warm, weak salsa, so unlike the fire I was used to, subbed in for spice. No pots of green chili stew. Grandpa wore a long-sleeved plaid shirt buttoned to his neck, notebook and pencil peeking out his front pocket, dark slacks and orthopedic shoes. His nut brown skin looked smooth and soft for his age. His eyes were sharp, his hands oversized for his compact body. His square head was striped with what remained of hair so faint it was colorless. In wedgie sandals I stood more than a head taller, so looked down at the tiny man who was venerated as a giant by my cousins, with a longing to share a lifetime of reasons for venerating him too. This being only my third in-person encounter with my first family, I knew little more about him than what he had shared in the previous few minutes. I swiped at the sheen on my forehead. My temples throbbed with the intense heat and keen concentration required to interpret his soft mumble with my rusted second language. To this day, I wonder how much of what I recall came from him, how much from me and a powerful imagination obliged to fill massive gaps, and how much from somewhere beyond the both of us. They weren't drinkers, this family, but how good a frosty, stiff margarita sounded on such a hot and stressful day. Commentators go on about how difficult it is to play at a mile high, as if it's so much easier for those of us accustomed to doing so to breathe here at sea level. It took real effort to suck air through soggy gauze at 100-degree heat and 90% humidity and not pass out. Where the hell was Miranda? I couldn't see the bar, but expected she was in there doing shots with the San Antonio cousins, toasting her astonishing grito delivered on a mic borrowed joyfully from the mariachis. I willed her to appear with a salted rim in each hand, one for her and one for me, her cuata adoptada. We looked so much alike, I still caught myself staring at her unblinking and unaware, stunned to see another me in the world, a magnet me who moved through each room, every crowd beaming. If she didn't know you, it was an accident, fixable now. It was so effortless to share a laugh with someone pretty, chichona, and witty, who remembered all the punchlines except when she didn't, and it came out even funnier. The family saw our physical resemblance from the beginning, posing us in pictures, and didn't bother to whisper about how surprising it was that neither of us had nabbed a man at our advanced ages. Couple of singles in a paired family. The D word, in my case, was another condition not mentioned in polite Catholic company. There was no need to worry about the boys, so I didn't. Fred and Gladys were surely busy proving to their new compadres what extraordinary grandparents they were, and by extension, fabulous and worthy parents. It was no use fighting about the sugar. Dell and Zeke would be pumped through by now. Besides, to wonder was all the effort I could expend, as I knew this chance to hear from my eldest blood relative was not likely to come again. Okay, I'm going to stop there. This is the latest version of the opening and only the beginning of the beginning. So you heard only the very top. Like I said, I've probably explored 22 different ways to come into the novel, but earlier versions didn't do a good enough job of setting up where the novel was going. They didn't prepare the reader and set expectations for them. I have learned I wasn't doing myself any favors by being coy. I needed to lay it out. Readers want to know early who they should care about and why. This approach is the first time I felt like, yes, this is the one, because of how many ways it sets up what I want the novel to say and do. It's like a garden, and you're planting all the curiosity seeds that will grow throughout the narrative, right? You don't want to answer all the questions. Super importantly, it's from the perspective of the main character. Yes, there are two main voices to this novel, but she is the primary character, so I chose her to come first. Beyond the few graphs you heard, the chapter, the rest of it, lays out the rules of this world, setting up that there will be some overlapping of time, for example, who some of the other main characters are, where they are, and vitally, what is at stake. I know you didn't get that in what I read, but I wanted to have time to talk through a few more challenges I have faced. So a reminder to put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. Now, next section. Another element that is really important about the new opening for me is the point of view. As I told you, I've written hundreds of pages in third person close for both characters and their past lives. Then I got stuck on this section forever, and a friend suggested changing the point of view. Now, I did not want to change the point of view. I don't like writing in first person because it makes me feel naked. But because I have a lot of respect for this writer friend, I tried it. And it has pretty much blown me away with the new energy, the new perspective that it brought. My next challenge, however, and I hope you, my next challenge, however, is do I go with first person for the male main character as well, or do I keep him in third person close? So let's see what you think. This is from a little later in the story from his perspective. So the title of this one is XY/2002. Valentine's Day was a bullshit Hallmark holiday for sure. Tacho had always hated the pressure, but like everything else with Yali, this one seemed preordained. What could they do but dive into love like eagles cartwheeling across the sky? He would be there a day late on Friday for dinner out. She'd already made reservations at a place in the foothills west of Denver, said to have a spectacular view. You're welcome to stay at my place, she said. All these hotel rooms have to be getting expensive. She had no idea, but he declined. He wasn't ready. The last time with his then wife had been disastrous. She'd already known she was leaving him, probably had men waiting in the wings. His body must have deduced the distance or grown accustomed to it after half a year apart and had opted out of the last act. Or maybe she'd refused to. He was surely drunk. It was hazy, quick and humiliating. But now he was glad that the time before that, their actual last time, was just a time. Nothing remarkable, nothing to carry with him. He couldn't even recall. With Yali, he wanted to record every moment, to bank each touch into the recession of his mind and the nerve endings of his skin. He would savor every first of their new life together like a kiss of dark chocolate, letting the richness melt on his tongue and linger until the next nibble. He was counting down the hours and yet terrified that after so much time and with so much anticipation, he wouldn't be enough to please her. There was only so much baseball he could think about. He didn't even like the sport, had never actually played on a team, but he determined to shower her with other kinds of affection. He found a florist near her job and sent orchids in a low vase with petals of magenta and labella of white. The card he chose featured a cartoon dog on the front, with the bouquet behind his back and a soggy heart in his mouth. Pienso en ti dia y noche. Forget besitos, how about slobber? Feliz dia de San Valentin. Orchids meant a lot to him, Tacho explained over the phone that night, because they reminded him of his grandmother, who had abandoned her New England comforts and made a life in Hawaii before it became a state. They reminded him of summers spent with her there, sleeping in a hammock in her backyard, drifting into dreams that smelled like salt, and waking to birdsong and surf. Swimming and swimming and swimming some more. So brown, the native kids called him cousin, as long as his grandmother wasn't around. When his parents had returned to retrieve him and his siblings and take them back to the desert, the drama and the drinking, Tacho had climbed to the top of his favorite tree, the one that looked out over the sugar sand and sapphire bay, and breathed silently while they called his name again and again. He prayed they would forget him and just leave. His prayer went unanswered until his next birthday, a day so long he'd fallen asleep still waiting for them to surprise him with cake. He hadn't celebrated birthdays since. As a teen, he collected aluminum cans for spending money, bought school clothes by the pound at Goodwill, never forgave his parents, his father, sober by then, for denying him a high school summer at oceanography camp. He never figured what else to become, so here he was, a social worker, following in their footsteps. Tacho had waited for Yali to call once she got the boys to bed. He hadn't turned on any lights, so laid in the dark on his twin mattress on the floor, surprised by the words tumbling out of his mouth. He apologized for rambling. Don't be silly, she said. I want to know everything about you. The next night, Yali drove them to the restaurant with the view. Of stars in the heavens or the towers of downtown, Tacho never noticed. They dined beside a fireplace without hearing its crackle. Perhaps there were scallops or steak, a red wine from Chile. The waiter was a man. No, a woman with striped hair. He couldn't say. But Yali wore a purple blouse under which peeked black lace, a tight skirt over sheer hose and strappy heels. She had perfect ankles. Tacha wore a smile even when he cried. Yali told him how it felt to be abandoned. Of course she couldn't remember the act itself, the shock of a cold, sterile room, the sharp sounds and smells, the screaming familiar scent of her life-giver, the bump of her distant heartbeat, a constant, constant, constant gone, for always. The forsaking lived so deep in her psyche it had showed up in her nightmares over a lifetime, the last not so long ago, not long before the sweat lodge. Tacho knew what it was to sorrow alone in bed, to wait for someone who never showed. But he was here now. I'm sorry it took me so long, he said. I forgive you, but you have to promise not to leave again, ever. Because she said again, he confessed to the sense of familiarity he had at the first sight of her on Matchmaker. How he had studied her photo, read and reread her profile, trying to figure out where he knew her from. He recognized then, before he heard her voice, before he was in her presence, that he had loved her before. I didn't tell you till now because I wanted you to give me a chance before you rushed to the courts for a restraining order. I have never felt like this before, Yali said. I could have known you forever. He put out his hands and she took them across the table. Maybe the restaurant shook with amber light. This isn't new, what we have found, he said, but renewed, a birthright to build on. I have loved you before. And I know everyone says that, but this is not a lifetime movie. I can't explain it. I can't prove anything. But when I'm with you, I'm like Vato Superman or something. And this whole messed up experience, the poverty, the racism, the closing of schools, the crazies living on the street, they're not so bad because I'm with you, which means today is one of the best days of my life. In the end, that statement would be fulfilled. Is there anything more intoxicating than new love, especially when that arrives easy and comfortable? To have loved before was added enchantment. Well, were certainly reasons they hadn't worked out the first time. In this beginning, they thought nothing of those. In his hotel room, with eyes wide open, they finally touched lips, slick and sweet as flan, a blended breath. He tasted her neck, her ears, the hollow of her collarbone, memorizing the zest of each. It's been a long time, he said, holding her hand at his belt buckle. I don't want to let you down. Then move your hand. They did not make love. They peeled off their skin and climbed one inside the other. Okay, that's part of another section. That's third person close, y'all, which is my favorite. So I don't know. I'm still debating that. I'm not there yet. I'm still in her voice. I'm going to do the whole. I've decided I'm going to do the whole first section just in her, and then I'll move into him. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned. I think I have time for one more. So let me go on with that one. Let's see. What did I want to talk about with this one? With this one, I wanted to share with you past lives. That has been the biggest challenge of this novel, let me tell you. In the beginning, I was writing these past lives and then I was writing the contemporary, and they were just kind of going in parallel, right? And then at IAI, Maria Lambertino read my thesis and she said, they've got to crash into each other. How are they pushing? How are the past lives pushing against the contemporary and vice versa? Well, that was 2018. And I think in the past year, I finally found an answer to that question. And the reality is, it's lots of answers. Now I have several approaches, like the first one that I shared with you. There will be a more of a past life from Grandpa, but you get a past life from him in that a past life, right? Like just starting to go back, because I'm taking you through the novel. We're going to go back through the history of what are now Chicano people. I'd go back all the way to, I don't want to give it away, to Tenochtitlan, okay? We're going to go back through the past lives in that direction. So that you get, that's kind of the first episode, if you will, of history appearing. And then as the book goes on, you get more and more of those episodes appearing in various ways throughout the novel. And sometimes they just appear, right? You just get a whole scene about what's happened, like a chapter of something that happened in the past. And I wanted to share one of those with you just because it's an important element of the book. So I'm going to share this one. And this one, the title is XX/XY 1800. And you probably figured out the titles by now, but there you go. Back then, Ninfa Gertrudis Lorenzana had known but one home. With scores of brothers and sisters, a distant mother with hair of cloth whose skin had pulled away from the bones of her face, and a tall, thin father in black robes who called each child my son or my daughter, no matter if they understood him or whether they were castizo, morisco, mestizo. Upon them he bestowed at baptism the esteemed surname of the archbishop who had a century before founded La Cuna. To Ninfa Gertrudis, the bond was divine and immutable. About 10 years of age, with a birthday assigned to one of the year's shortest of days, when the bitter wind made her long to possess winter woolens, Ninfa Gertrudis was still too young to bind her chest, but expected any day to know the shame of soiling her underthings in a womanly way. Ninfa Gertrudis could already mend a hole in a stocking and leave no knot large enough to trouble even the smallest toe. But unlike many of the young ladies preparing for a husband, Ninfa Gertrudis did the task well because she brooked no other approach to the duties of life. She was, in fact, far more interested in letters than in marriage or motherhood. She taught herself to read well enough to offer lessons to her favorite siblings, which included the hardy ones who maintained their health and never ventured away without permission, who performed the tasks required of them and suffered the regular privations and punishments with grace enough to avoid their compounding. She had no patience for whiners and criers, although she could recall nothing from her time before La Cuna, and had long before given up trying. She took great pride in having always been good, obedient, and faithful. When she was summoned after Mass and before breakfast to attend the mother, Ninfa Gertrudis had no reason to fear. She had, perhaps, proved herself worthy early, and would be asked to prepare to become a bride of Christ. As she made her way to the quarters where children were generally forbidden, imagining a future dedicated to chastity, poverty, obedience, and the future care of foundlings with the same esteemed name, Ninfa Gertrudis lifted her long, skinny trenzas onto her back and strode across the open courtyard as if her braids had turned to cloth. Within days, Ninfa Gertrudis and 10 of her sisters rode away from La Cuna in a covered four-wheel cart pulled by a mule through the frigid haze of dawn. Their 9 brothers would walk the 8 days to the sea, where the lot of them would board a ship bound for Alta California to serve the crown and the church with their presence in lands heretofore deemed, as the children themselves had always been, incorrectly as far as Ninfa Gertrudis was concerned, uncivilized. Pulling away slowly, the mule straining but in no particular rush, Ninfa Gertrudis had time to take in the cradle of her early life. The wash of the walls and the red of the roofs were clouded gray. The early morning calls of the vendors of carbon and lard muffled. Even the feral orange cat blended into her stone perch but for the swishing of her tail. The mother, the father, her favorite siblings were all at mass, at breakfast, pursuing the course of another day. Although she hoped some one of her favorite siblings would continue their studies without her and learn to form their letters with proficiency enough to compose a correspondence that would one day bring news of La Cuna to her in faraway lands, it was not to be. The children departed without ceremony, escorted by a caretaker each for boys and for girls. It was the cold day before Ninfa Gertrudis was designated to achieve the age of 11. All right, I'm going to stop at that one. I love writing those. They are so much fun to write, to just let your imagination go crazy and, be in another place and time. Just some, I don't know if I have time to read another. Shorty, do you think I do, Val Austin, or should I get on to?
No, I think if you have one more to read, that would be great. And
Okay.
you have about 4 or 5 questions already. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think there's plenty of time.
All right. Awesome. I read faster than I thought I was going to read. So let's see. What do I want to read to you guys? I kind of wanted to read something a little funny, but I've read this one before. Let's see. Bear with me for a sec. Let me figure this out. Oh, and of course now my computer's being silly. I'm sorry. Okay, this one's actually not funny, but it's another example of the two of them together. Later in the novel, way much later in the novel. So let me go. I'll just go with this. This one is called Wish You Were Here. Tacho texted a line or two, a greeting most nights. They'd given up on bedtime calls with the littles, and Du Bois might never speak to him again. Tacho had stopped listening. Nieves figured it out first. She laid on my bed with colored pencils, pretending not to listen, poking holes in her paper and dotting the quilt beneath. Poor Santi was so young. Dad, 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 he said until Tacho responded, What? But before Santi could finish telling him about hitting a double only a second time at bat, or the algebra problem he and his friends solved over an afternoon, taking up the whole whiteboard at school, Tacho interrupted. You don't believe how cold it is out here. I'm freezing my nuts off. And still dying of thirst like it's 100 degrees outside. You know how hard it is to find water out here? Water tastes like shit. They quit asking him not to curse. More wasted time. My stomach curdled every time the phone rang late or early, during dinner, pretty much any time. What boulders would slide down on us next? Texts were better. I waited for them, usually while brushing my teeth before bed. He still had some sense of time, and I was grateful to know he was alive. This late fall night, frigid as winter, I was in bed with a novel, losing myself in someone else's reality so I could sleep, when he texted far later than usual. Please call me. I'm so lonely. I squeezed my eyes shut and pictured him on a cold, hard bench, one of the forest green ones they put a middle armrest in to make them lousy for sleeping. No, somewhere darker but safer, hidden among the trees. But downtown parks had few trees, and they weren't particularly safe. Would he hide out in an alley behind a collection of trash cans? His dwindled self from buff and beautiful to downright skinny. Back to his high school weight, he'd said. Smelly probably too, since I'd changed the Y membership from family to single to save a few dollars. Where am I supposed to shower? He'd complained. And how am I supposed to pay the bills? I said. He had nowhere to wash his clothes either. Secondhand garments so worn the segunda couldn't sell them. Human Services was always collecting socks and gloves for men like him, but did he have a coat? I couldn't picture him lugging around a blanket and pillow or pushing a shopping cart. He didn't have that many possessions. Did he rest his head on his backpack to protect his charger, his toothbrush, his files, school photos of the kids, a bottle of vodka in the narrow pocket on the side? I'd endured yet another 14-hour day of not pleasing anyone, no matter how many meetings I took about the crisis. No one on the mayor's team knew my situation, solving for homelessness with my own husband out on the street. I needed sleep, but felt Tacho's text like a heart bruise. No one should suffer the way he has. If he'd only stop drinking and come home. I closed the book and left it on his side, clicked off the light and dialed. I didn't have to call. I didn't want to call. He answered before it rang. The sound of him hurt my throat. Does my voice sound creaky? He said. I haven't spoken in days. He sounded sober. You sound like you, I said. Good to hear. Surprised it still works. Sounds a little dry. Drink some water. I heard a shuffle, a cap twist to swallow. I no longer asked what he was drinking or where he was. I tried to force myself to stop imagining as if I could. Have you eaten? Yeah. No, I don't know. Was it yesterday, day before? I was sitting in the Mickey D's charging my phone, and my stomach got rumbly smelling the food, So I asked an older Mexican lady for some change to get something so they wouldn't toss me out. This time, his voice cracked. She bought me breakfast, he said, the whole meal. Egg sandwich, potatoes, coffee, as if she could sit with me, eat and talk like humans. He snuffled. I pressed my eyes to keep from picturing him begging. I would always prefer him as he was, in tie and ponytail, his dimpled grin enchanting all the white women. She said I reminded her of her son. We all look alike, right? Not even close. He's younger, a soldier. When I asked where he was, she cried, said not knowing let her hope. As long as he's alive, there's hope. I quoted his dad, but wondered if he knew that. He probably thought I'd picked it up in Al-Anon and had no clue. I'd once clung to those words, prayed with them, maybe did still. She gave me $5. Didn't even say what not to spend it on. Plus that hot sandwich, which tasted delicious. I don't even like that shit. I know, you know. I knew every scar, scarred over, scraped and reopened, wore them like my own, which some of them were, but under a suit with a skirt. Don't get mad, but I miss you. I felt that old flutter. I've never stopped missing you. I have to make my own dinner now. The lean cuisine queen. Not anymore. You ruined me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry too. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I ruined everything. The disease ruined everything. Come on, man. I made choices. Make different choices. I'm trying. Try harder. Don't try. Do eso. Yeah. We were silent a long time, like the before times, laying together in the dark, my cold feet warming between his calves. I curled my fingers where his generous hand once fit. My hand remembered the feel of his strong, fleshy, warm, constant. I made a crushing fist. How are you doing? How many ages since he'd asked? I spoke of her knot in my chest. I'm tired. Got in trouble on Saturday for missing a call at 2 a.m. Ringers must stay on at all times, except in meetings. I should let you sleep. What's that? You sure? Wish you were here, if only. I thought we were going to make it, get old and fat together, eat olives and cheese with good bread for dinner. Don't forget the wine. Always the fucking wine with you. Yep. Would be incomplete without wine, to be honest. I keep saying a bottle, though, not a gallon. Shit. It felt right to laugh. And not that cooking sherry shit. Shit's got 17% alcohol. The truth was not so funny. He moved on. I'm proud of you, he said. It's been hard, but look at you now. Working 14 hours a day, doing important work. You busted your ass. You deserve what you got. I hate that word. Who deserves anything? You deserve better than you got. You're smarter than 9/10 of the people I work with. Really smart people who do a lot of stupid shit. You drew a shitty hand. Played it like shit. Come on. He took another sip. I doubted it was water. He always complained water was impossible to get, like he didn't buy other bottles with palms full of nickels. Still, maybe it was water. It might yet happen, I said. I keep praying. Tried that. Don't give up. But you have, he whispered. The paperwork, the court date, don't do it, please. The courtroom was down the long marble hall from my office. Any footsteps, I slipped into the ladies. It's on you. Stop already. My sponsor says I should get a lawyer. I sat up. For what? You have a sponsor? He says for the kids, at least the house. I need a place too. I bought this house for our kids, for us. He says it doesn't matter. He says that's a law. You can't be serious. Have you talked to a lawyer? He says one comes on Wednesday. My jaw ached. I stretched it. Would you really try to take the house? Could I ask for the mayor's help, the city attorney's? Confess? I don't know what to do. Live on the curb? Get sober and come home. I need more time. After all this time, what else is there, honey? It had been so long since he'd called me that. I stared at the half of the bed empty but for the novel about star-crossed lovers, race, and home. Love, I said. He was quiet so long I wondered if he was still there. If that was all it took, he said, finally, we wouldn't need phone calls. All right, that's it, I think, for now. Thank you, thank you. I think we're going to take some questions, right?
Yes, please. Thank you for being so generous and describing your process and um, all of this. I think as writers, these are things that we battle with, and it's really nice to know that to not feel so alone in it. So thank you. The first question, how do you keep track of the storylines over such a long period? Do you outline or use index cards?
I have tried everything. I have sticky notes on the walls. I have this giant, I did a residency at Ragdale and I put butcher paper across the whole wall and made this giant outline. I have index cards, I have Scrivener, I have a million different things. And I don't know that there's an easy answer with something this complicated. But I will tell you that I've worked on it so long and just, I don't know, a few months ago, something clicked. And I just feel like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I understand now. And it's finally coming easier, not easy, but easier. So pray for me that I can get through this draft and it will continue to feel that way. So, yeah.
Definitely. I hope you can stay in that space. That's great.
Yes, yes.
How important is the title to you as the novel is still in progress? Do you keep other options in mind for titles?
This is probably, this is a theme, right? A number, version, whatever. I think this is probably title 7 of this. And this is the one that has stuck for a while. And at this point, unless something knocks this one off of the mountain, I'll stick with it until I get an agent and a publisher and they, have some other brilliant idea. But I did actually pose this one to an agent at a conference and she loved it. So that sort of sealed it for me, at least for now. But I think for questions like that, don't let them get in your way. Like, keep writing the book, keep working on the story, and let those kinds of questions get answered when they get answered. It'll happen.
Great. This is a question for me as a librarian and a writer. I'm struggling with writing about history. So how much research have you done to describe the past lives?
I have done so much research. I mean, that's one of the reasons it's taken me so long, is because it took me a while to identify which portions of history I wanted to do. And to get there, I had to really study a lot of Mexican history and look back and then figure out, well, what would they be doing and what was happening at that time? Because it's not just about the characters, right? It's also about the politics around it, what was happening in history at that time. And because I have it in my head that I want to do, this is a history of the peoples of the Southwest, I have to figure out, how does it go back? So I had to kind of pick out the most important points in time, or at least important points in time, and then, do the research around there, and then figure out how my characters would interact in those times. So like Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, the famous Mexican poet, I didn't know she was going to show up. But then when I started doing research and whatever, I mean, she was probably the easiest one to insert into the story. And because there's not a lot known about her, there's a little bit and a lot of speculation. I mean, I just felt like, oh, this is a blast, because it's the details enough to make it feel real. And then the rest is imagination. So it's so fun to dive into that, but at some point you have to just say, this is why I need something from history, what I need from history, and then just write what you're going to write.
That's good advice. Just what you read, that they got into a cart. I was like, oh, what kind of cart? And like, I would want to research that probably way too far. So thank you
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah.
Um,
And for
let's
the
see.
record, I did research carts
Did
and like
you?
what, oh my gosh, yeah. But thank God for Google Images, because
Mhm.
sometimes that's all I'll do, right? At this point where I'm just trying to write, I'll just I'll pull up carts popular in Mexico at this point in time and pick one. And that's the one that will be in my brain. And that's the one I will describe or use or whatever. But like when I was looking back for carts in particular, there's so many different kinds. I don't know what they mean. If I said that, I wouldn't even know. So cart, right? Good enough.
Great. Do the 23 question mark opening drafts reveal information that you incorporate into other places?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Well, not 100%, probably 70%, I think. Some of those, like so much of this novel, I mean, everybody's different, right? For me, I really had to write into the novel. I couldn't just imagine what it would be until I got it on the page. I had to see it on the page. I had to start figuring out, does this character work? Does this time frame work? Do I have enough historical knowledge to feel comfortable writing this? And only when I actually got it on the page and something worked did I say, okay, yeah, that's good. And honestly, some of those beginnings, I really liked the language of them, or I liked the place, or I liked what I was doing with the characters or whatever, but they just weren't working hard enough ultimately, to set things up. Like I love the idea of seeding the novel, curiosity seeds. How do I get people to want to keep reading? How am I feeding them questions that, hopefully keeps them turning the pages? And some of those just weren't working hard enough. They weren't doing that, or they weren't going in the direction that I needed them to go. But it took me that many times to kind of figure out, oh, that's what I need to do. And here's a way that I can do it. So it's not an easy answer for me, at least. It wasn't an easy answer. I'm really praying that this one sticks.
Right. Since the novel spans centuries and parallel past lives, have you considered publishing it as a series?
Um, I think I kind of abandoned that idea when I abandoned the trilogy idea. Um, I'm too slow and too picky of a writer. I will draft something and then I write in layers. So I'll get down what the, like something of it. It'll be an image, it'll be what happened, it'll be something that gets me writing that. And then I'll read it again and I'll realize, oh, I don't have enough from this character. It's all about this character, but this character is important. So I have to go back and write about that. Or, the setting isn't strong enough. So I have to go back and build in the setting. Or what am I seeding? What are the questions? I have to go back and do the questions. So, for example, that first section that I read to you, I've been writing that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I read it and then I think I'm done and I set it aside and then I pick it up and I read it again and I realize, oh shoot, I didn't do this, or this question isn't raised, or something is missing, and then I have to add another layer. But with each layer that I add, it hopefully just gets richer, and the language gets stronger and the idea gets more firm in my brain. So it's that's just the way I work, and I think everybody's different. So for somebody else, they might be able to do something like that with this, but yeah, the publisher would probably be like, or the magazine publisher, whatever, they'd be like, what is wrong with you? When are we going to get the next one? Plus, it's all connected, right? So even though I have these ideas of how these things all fit together, I don't have an ending because I don't know how, now that I'm crashing them together, what happens. I have an idea what happens, but I don't have it on the page yet, so I'm not absolutely sure what's going to happen. I'll find out.
When you do story, do you image the story, kind of talk to yourself in your head? It might sound weird, but that's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think people like to say that the writing happens even when you're not at a keyboard. And for me, that is also absolutely true. I'm picturing it in my brain and I'm thinking about it. It's like, this pot that's just boiling in the back of my head, simmering rather in the back of my head. And I'm always thinking about it and I'm always imagining what it could be. And I think, that's also one of the reasons I will resort to Google Images, or like I hung up a picture of my own grandpa right here so that as I'm writing, I can look at him and I can, picture him doing these things or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think for visual people, which I am, I'm not an audible person. I think for some audible people, right, you got to play music or you need something. And for me, I do need the visual to be able to get it on the page. And then I have to be able to picture it in my head as I'm reading, which is how I read as well. Like my favorite authors are ones who will stop me and I will have to close my eyes and imagine what they've said. It's already going in my brain, but I have to stop and savor that image for a minute. So I think that's what you're talking about. And yeah, I mean, that works for you, works for me. Let's do it.
Okay, so this is a question from somebody who's saying using your phrases and metaphors in writing a creative story or poem of my own. I think they're asking if they use your phrases and metaphors in their story or their poem. What are your thoughts about that?
Those are mine. So I think you can be inspired by them. You could think, wow, that's really nice. How can I make this mine, right? Because you're not writing the same story. So how would my images work in your story? You're gonna have your own story and you need your own images in order to tell that story, because that is the story. That's what it's built of, right? That's like saying, can I build my house out of, your materials? Well, but they're holding up my house. What's going to hold up your house if you're trying to use these? What your writing needs to be is your own work. And that doesn't mean that you can't be influenced. Like my favorite is Louise Erdrich. She's my goddess. And I keep her books right here. And when I'm struggling with something, I'm like, how did Louise do that? And I'll go back and I'll look. And sometimes I will like steal her structure. This is how she set that up. And then I'll set mine up that way. But it ultimately turns out very different I'm not writing her story, I'm writing mine. Hope that's helpful.
Great answer. So we have two more questions, three more questions. We'll get to, is writing a difficult career sometimes? What are the qualities you need to become a writer?
I think for me, it's been the only thing I've ever wanted to do in my whole life. I've had lots of jobs. I was a journalist and communications person or whatever, but this is what has always just driven me. And I think if you're going to be a writer, Pam Houston told me this, it's not about the what happens with your writing, if it gets published or whatever. That's not it. If you're a writer, you like to sit in a dark room with a blank page and create. And so if that is your jam, then it doesn't matter if it's easy or if you get paid or whatever. I mean, that's what you have to do. And so you do it. I've been working on this for years. When and if I do finally get paid, it's going to be, pennies for all the work that I've done, but it doesn't matter because this is what feeds my soul. So if it's what feeds your soul, you got to do what you got to do.
Great. Do you create a storyboard or try and get your ideas on paper and making a visual like a map of events? And if so, does that actually help?
Yes. Yes and yes. I've done all kinds of things. I have a timeline, like of history timeline. I have a timeline of the contemporary. I have sketches of the characters. I have storyboards like this and this and this is going to happen and what happens. One of my favorite exercises is what if, right? So what if this happened or what if that happened? And I'll just sit for 15 minutes and write out what would happen if, and then, take the one that I like and run with it. I mean, honestly, there are no wrong answers. If it's working for you, it works, right? That's the only thing that matters. So try it and try what works for you. Figure it out. Like that's the hard part about writing. Nobody's going to give you like, oh, do these 10 things and then you're there. You have to figure out what are your 10 things that speak to you and speak to your story. And then once you figure those 10 things out, then you hopefully get your story. But probably the hardest thing about being a writer, two things. One is you have to have skin that's about this thick because there will be criticism and there will be rejection, period. It's just going to happen all the time. And then the other thing that I was going to say just went right out of my brain. Oh, persistence. Persistence is the other thing. Like you just have to keep doing it you just don't give up.
Great advice. This is kind of a technical question. Since you use Scrivener, if you write and rewrite a chapter numerous times, do you write all of those drafts in that project, or do you open a new project? In other words, how do you keep organized within the project?
That has honestly always been a super challenge for me, which is one of the reasons I went to Scrivener, is hoping that Scrivener would solve that problem for me. I don't think I ever got far enough with Scrivener to really have that happen. I think Scrivener is more a tool for once you really do have a lot that you can organize and move things around easily. But for me, for drafting, I never did figure out how to save this draft and that draft and that draft. It's one of the problems with Scrivener is how complicated it is. It's not, just easy to figure out, I don't think. So I still use Word, but it's terrible for organizing. So honestly, if you have answers for organizing, call me because I would love to hear them too. I think whenever you're working on a long project, it's just going to be hard to keep track of it. And you just have to figure out again what works for you. I try to think in chunks, right? This is this section and then what fits in this section. This is this section and what fits in this section. And then date everything. That's another big one. Backup. That's another downside to Scrivener that I think it tells you when you're saving a project, to set up a backup. So I thought, oh, that means they're saving it and then I have a backup. My backup crashed and I found out that Scrivener does not save it. Without that backup, I can't get to that. So be aware of that. That is super problematic.
Wow. This was the first question, but was related to what you talked about at the very beginning, so I'm saving it for the last. What
Okay.
was the name of the poet you mentioned at the beginning?
Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, and she was a 17th century poet in Mexico. Um, she's often considered the first feminist because she wrote about how back then, they thought they wouldn't even educate women. They weren't allowed in schools, and they, didn't want them to have books or do writing or anything like that. And she fought back against that, which is why she got in so much trouble. But she's one of the most famous Mexican writers ever. So if you haven't read her, I highly recommend it. There's a zillion translations of her at this point.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rowena, for sharing so much tonight, your work and your advice and your experience. And we'll really look forward to seeing you again next week and seeing what kind of challenging prompts you have for us and what else you would like to share. So thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Yay. Thank you all so much for being here. And I really do look forward to seeing you next week. We'll get some fun work done.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. See you next week.
Good night.